United Nations Radio presents The New Voices. This is the first in a series of programs for and about the recently independent African states in the World Organization.
This is an introduction. An introduction, first of all, to a series of programs. An introduction also to some of the men who represent the newly independent states of Africa in the councils of world diplomacy. An introduction, finally, to some of the ideas which have been voiced by the new African delegates in the United Nations. To begin with an historic day for the new African states and for the World Organization. September the 20th, 1960. The scene is the General Assembly Hall of the United Nations at UN headquarters in New York. The occasion is the opening of the Assembly's 15th annual session. Representatives of more than 80 states, among them numerous figures of world renown, have just elected the President of the Assembly, Frederick H. Boland, Ireland's ambassador to the United Nations. Mr. Boland thanks the delegates for their confidence in him and then turns to the next item on the Assembly's order of business.
With the permission of the Assembly, I now propose to put before it, and I do so with great satisfaction, item number 20 of our provisional agenda entitled Admission of New Members to the United Nations. The special procedure of dealing
The admission of new members, always an important event in the United Nations, is of particular significance on this September the 20th, 1960, because waiting for admission are not just one or two, but more than a dozen newly independent countries from Africa, with each membership application unanimously endorsed by the UN Security Council. Assembly President Boland now puts the first name before the Assembly.
If there is no objection, I propose to declare the Republic of Cameroon admitted to membership of the United Nations.
Applause greeting a new delegation which is solemnly seated in its place in the Assembly Hall, the Republic of Cameroon, represented on this festive occasion by its Foreign Minister, Charles Okala.
La République du Cameroun affirme solennellement qu'elle croit à la charte.
The Republic of Cameroon solemnly affirms its belief in the Charter of the United Nations and solemnly proclaims its will to adhere to its principles and to conform to the obligations assumed thereunder. It is happy to make its entry into the company of so many sister nations in identity of aspirations and within the framework of African solidarity and hope in the future.
A declaration of support for the United Nations, for the ideas it stands for the work it tries to do. Similar declarations will be made by all the other new African member states, some of which have had a long association with the World Organization as trust territories before their independence. Cameroon was one, and so was the second new member of 1960.
If there is no objection, I shall declare the Togolese Republic duly admitted to membership of the United Nations.
Again, applause rises in the Assembly Hall, and again a new delegation is escorted to its place. And a Prime Minister speaks to the delegates, Sylvanus Olympio of the Republic of Togo.
L'Afrique, plus que quiconque, a besoin de la paix, car cette paix...
Africa, more than any other continent, needs peace, because peace is the prerequisite for its own improvement and the consolidation of the freedom required and the improvement of the living conditions of the inhabitants of the continent. That is why African states, and in particular Togoland, will do everything in their power to assist the United Nations efforts, which alone, by maintaining peace, can enable us to attain our full development.
Assembly President Boland continues with the list of new membership applications.
If I hear no objection, I propose to declare the Malagasy Republic duly admitted to membership.
Leading the delegation of the Malagasy Republic is Ambassador Louis Rakato-Malala.
La nation malgache est éprise de paix, et elle vous apportera tout son appui.
Madagascar knows that it can count on the support of all those countries in the United Nations which intend to extend the hand of friendship to those which, like Madagascar, expect much from the international solidarity which is one of the basic tenets of United Nations doctrines. Our country, which is peace-loving, will give the United Nations every support in its pursuit of the ideal of peace, which, and I proclaim it in a loud voice, is the main reason for our presence here.
The next country to be admitted is in part again a former trust territory of the United Nations, a country which has even adopted the blue of the United Nations flag as its own national colour.
If I hear no objection, I propose to declare the Republic of Somalia duly admitted to membership of the United Nations.
Speaking in the name of the Republic of Somalia is Haji Farah Ali Omar.
From this moment in which the Somali flag that appears, and not by mere chance, the same colors of the World Organization flag, the government, the Republic of Somalia, is at the full disposal of the United Nations in the pursuance of the goals of peace, well-being, and progress outlined in our Charter.
The next candidate for United Nations membership is known around the world. It is the scene of a United Nations operation of unprecedented scope and magnitude.
Unless I hear any objection, I propose to declare the Republic of Congo, of which the capital is Leopoldville, duly admitted to membership of the United Nations.
But because of uncertainty about the constitutional and political situation in the Congo, no delegation from that country is seated at this time.
The next candidate for admission to the United Nations is the Republic of Dahomey. If I hear no objection, I propose to declare the Republic of Dahomey duly admitted to membership of the United Nations.
Leading the delegation of Dahomey is François Aplogan.
Nous apportons l'assurance que la modeste contribution dahoméenne cours des débats qui vont s'engager.
We wish to assure the Assembly that the contribution of Dahomey during the course of the debates will stem from African generosity and wisdom. Our presence here implies that we accept the principles of the Charter of the United Nations. We subscribe to them without qualification. We are proud to be present at this historic meeting, and we wish to thank you.
The next candidate for admission to the United Nations is the Republic of Niger. Unless I hear any objection, I propose to declare the Republic of Niger duly admitted to membership of the United Nations.
For the Republic of Niger, its Minister of Justice, Issoufou Seydouja Makoy.
Nous voilà donc parmi vous, Monsieur le Président. Nous sommes prêts à ne vous marchander aucun de nos efforts.
We are now among you. We are prepared to spare no efforts in the fulfillment of the tasks which the Assembly has before it. We dare hope that however modest may be our contribution to the construction of a world of peace, that contribution will not be superfluous, because it will always be oriented towards human welfare.
The next candidate for admission to membership is the Republic of the Upper Volta. Unless I hear any objection, I propose to declare the Republic of the Upper Volta duly admitted to membership of the United Nations.
As many other countries formerly under French rule, Upper Volta expresses its thanks also to France. Leading the new delegation, Bakray Traoré.
Je me fais ici un très agréable devoir de rendre un solennel hommage à ses dirigeants et ses peuples.
I now have the happy duty of paying a solemn tribute to France, its leaders and people, and first and foremost to General de Gaulle, the leader of France. Fate decreed the meeting of our roads, And this is the way in which we have traveled the road together, in the certainty that we will continue our friendship and continue to cooperate loyally with the old estate.
Next candidate for admission to membership is the Republic of the Ivory Coast. Unless I hear any objection, I propose to consider the Republic of the Ivory Coast as having been admitted to membership of the United Nations.
Speaking for the Ivory Coast, Deputy Prime Minister Mamadou Coulibaly refers to the Conseil de l'Entente, which encompasses 4 of the new member states.
Déjà encouragé par la formule simple, mais combien réaliste et efficace.
Already encouraged by the simple but realistic and efficient formula of the brotherly cooperation of states in mutual respect for the individuality of the partners, as expressed in the Conseil de l'Entente, which groups the 4 republics of Dahomey, Niger, the Upper Volta, and the Ivory Coast. The government of my country affirms here, through me, its ardent desire to contribute to the construction of an international edifice, thereby strengthening throughout the world the universal desire for peace with respect for the freedom of the citizens of the world.
The next candidate for membership is the Republic of Chad. Unless I hear any objection, I propose to consider the Republic of Chad as having been admitted to membership of the United Nations.
Representing the Republic of Chad at the admission ceremonies, Foreign Minister J.P. Touragaba conveys the greetings of his Chief of State.
C'est un grand honneur pour mon pays d'avoir été admis à l'unanimité comme membre.
It is a great honor for my country to have been unanimously recommended for membership in the United Nations organization. On behalf of the Chief of State of the Republic of Chad, His Excellency President Tombol Baye, and of all the people of Chad, as well as on my own behalf, I thank the President of the General Assembly for this proof of confidence.
The next candidate for membership is the Republic of the Congo, of which the capital is Brazzaville. Unless I hear any objection, I propose to regard the Republic of the Congo, Brazzaville, as having been admitted to membership of the United Nations.
Coming to the Assembly rostrum on behalf of the Republic of Congo is Stéphane Sichel, Vice President of the Council of Ministers and Minister of the Interior.
Dans la joie de notre admission, une pensée émue s'envole au-delà de nos frontières vers nos frères.
On this day of our admission, our thoughts still go out to those of our brothers who are not yet free. We extend our fraternal hand also to the Republic of the Congo that has its capital at Leopoldville. For that we rely upon the high understanding of all the leaders of that country, and particularly upon their goodwill, today more than ever, and also upon the selfless action of the United Nations in this respect. Long live the United Nations, and long live peace.
The next candidate for membership is the Republic of Gabon. Unless I hear any objection, I propose to declare the Republic of Gabon as having been duly admitted to membership of the United Nations.
The Republic of Gabon, the 12th new member state to be admitted to the United Nations on that historic day in September 1960, is represented by its Minister of Finance, Economy and Planning, André Gustave Anguillet.
Mon gouvernement pense que cette entrée massive de pays africains dans la famille des nations indépendantes.
My delegation believes that this mass entry of African states into the family of independent and sovereign nations should, above all, mean a positive contribution to the debates and actions of the organization, so that through the representatives of the African states in the United Nations, the words of the great leaders of Africa, whom we all admire, should attain complete achievement. Africa will be the continent of the fulfillment of the hopes of people.
The next candidate for membership is the Central African Republic. Unless I hear any objection, I propose to declare the Central African Republic as having been duly admitted to membership of the United Nations.
Once more, a scene takes place that is by now familiar. With delegates applauding, the representatives of the new member states are escorted to their place in the Assembly Hall. The delegation of the Central African Republic is led by Foreign Minister Maurice Dejean.
L'admission de mon pays au sein de l'Organisation des Nations Unies survient.
The admission of my country to membership in the United Nations comes at a time when grave problems in the African continent engage the attention of the whole world, and in particular, the attention of this General Assembly. The harmonious process by which, thanks to the inspiration of two great statesmen, our lamented President, Barthélemy Boganda, and General de Gaulle, the Central African Republic has been able to attain its independence without difficulties, and in friendship with France, demonstrates once again, if that was necessary, that all international questions can be peacefully settled by negotiations carried out in an atmosphere of loyalty and goodwill.
The Central African Republic was the 13th and last newly independent African state to be admitted to the United Nations on September the 20th, 1960. The Assembly delayed action on a 14th African membership application, which had come from the short-lived Federation of Mali. Instead, a week later, the two component states of the former federation were admitted separately into the ranks of the World Organization.
May I take it that the Assembly is ready to decide by acclamation to receive the Republic of Senegal as a member of the United Nations?
Addressing the General Assembly in the name of Senegal, Foreign Minister Doudou Thiam.
Le problème qui se posera à nous de plus en plus est non point celui de la lutte contre un
The problem which will arise before us more and more is no longer the one of struggle against colonialism, the disappearance of which is inevitable, but it is one of knowing how we can make up the ever-increasing gap and how we can bridge the gulf that separates the developed countries from the underdeveloped countries.
And here the second membership application that was approved by the Assembly on September 28th.
May I take it that the Assembly also desires, by acclamation, to admit the Republic of Mali to membership of the United Nations?
The acceptance speech of the Republic of Mali, delivered by Mamadou Or, differed in tone from the other acceptance statements.
Nous affirmons ici que la vague d'indépendance qui déferle sur l'Afrique est irrésistible.
We declare here that the tide of independence in the continent of Africa is irresistible and will carry all before it. It would be most dangerous for world peace if the metropolitan countries, having ruled over Africa, should continue to hope that they could keep their grasp on Africa by fomenting plots against the sovereignty of the young nations. The great hope of this organization is that all complexes between the great and small should disappear here, so that we can work side by side to build a new world in peace and liberty.
And then, on October 7th, came the most recent addition to the roster of the World Organization, the 16th new African state, the 99th member of the United Nations.
May I take it that the Assembly decides, by acclamation, to receive the Federation of Nigeria as a member of the United Nations?
On this festive occasion, the Nigerian delegation was led by Prime Minister Alhaji Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa. In his address, the Prime Minister spelled out an important guideline for the work of his country in the United Nations.
We are willing to learn before we rush into the field of international politics. But we are totally unwilling to be diverted from the ideals which we think true. That is the reason, Mr. President, why we in Nigeria shall not be found to align ourselves as a matter of routine with any particular bloc. Indeed, I hate the very idea of blocs existing at all in the United Nations. It seems to me to be a contradiction in terms. We in Nigeria honestly believe in the principles of the United Nations, and we believe that with a change of heart among the members, and especially among the more powerful nations, there is no reason why there should not be peace and happiness. I think that all will agree that the present tension in the world is due to mutual suspicion and the efforts made by groups of countries to impose ideological notions of one kind or another on their neighbors.
This idea of non-alignment, of an independent policy, was also voiced by a number of other new African states. Speaking for the Republic of Niger, Noma Kaka.
J'adresse, au nom de ma délégation, un appel pressant aux grandes puissances qui se partagent le monde en influence.
I address a pressing appeal to the great powers that are dividing the world in their spheres of influence. Out of regard for the sufferings of human beings deprived of their elementary rights and kept in servitude, and out of regard for the destitution of those nations who have just emerged from this, we ask for that at least some time you keep us away from your quarrels of the Cold War. The fledgling nations will have to find their own way ahead.
Or, along similar lines, André Gustave Anguille of Gabon.
Nous opposerons fermement à toute tentative d'où qu'elle vienne, qui tendrait à nous considérer.
We shall firmly oppose any attempt, from whatever source, designed to consider us a mere pawn in the struggle for influence in the world, and particularly in Africa. In the light of the grave situations which may arise in Africa, we wish to contribute to the debates in an objective and constructive manner.
On the same subject, yet another new voice, Mamadou Or, the chairman of the Mali delegation.
Pour les 4,5 millions de Maliens que nous avons l'honneur de représenter ici, la volonté d'être libre, quel qu'en soit.
For the 4.5 million persons whom we are honored to represent here, the will to be free at any cost is irrevocable. We are perfectly aware of the interdependence of peoples, and the imperatives of universal solidarity, but we are determined to live by ourselves. We prefer material privation to alienation of our freedom, for we knew of this latter all too well during all the years of colonial rule.
And here, the voice of Abbé Fulbert Youlou, President of the Republic of the Congo with Brazzaville as its capital, quoting to the General Assembly the historic Monroe Doctrine, with the word Africa substituted for the word America.
Le continent africain donné la liberté et l'indépendance qu'il a obtenue.
The African continent, in view of the liberty and independence which it has obtained, must not henceforward be regarded as a field for colonialization on the part of any power whatsoever. Henceforward, Africa will belong to itself, and we will oppose any attempt to jeopardize its independence and liberty. Keep your system of government, if that is your pleasure, but do not endeavor to propagate it amongst us. We are a new world in every sense of the word, new by virtue of our political conceptions, new by virtue of our love for human rights, new by virtue of our hope for an increasingly happy and increasingly broad life for each and every one of us. Leave us the freedom to fulfill our destiny, just as we abandon you willingly to your complications, to your tyrannies, and to your wars.
Non-intervention in African affairs by foreign powers is stressed particularly in a field which virtually all new African delegates regard as the most urgent problem of them all, economic development. Africa desperately needs huge capital resources to start building even the elementary foundations of a modern economic life. But will the provision of such capital directly from a foreign power become the 20th century equivalent of 19th century imperialism, a kind of neo-colonialism? On this point, Ousmane Ba, speaking for the Republic of Mali.
Des exemples récents devraient inciter les nations en voie de développement.
Recent examples should lead the countries just beginning to develop to act with great prudence, so that this assistance lead no longer to economic slavery. which is a slavery without obvious chains, but the chains do exist.
All these strong statements advocating genuine African independence, both political and economic, do not amount to isolationism. Time and again, the new African delegates in the United Nations affirm that their countries are willing and prepared to take their new places in the conduct of global affairs, to shoulder their share of the burden to keep the world at peace, to raise their new voices in the councils of international diplomacy. Prime Minister Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa of Nigeria.
Please do not think that we are not interested in the problems of the rest of the world. We are intensely interested in them and hope to be allowed to assist in finding solutions to them through this organization. But being human, we are naturally concerned first with what affects our immediate neighborhood. We do indeed believe in the United Nations organization as providing perhaps the only effective machinery for inducing world peace. But while proudly and gratefully accepting membership of this supreme world body, may, sir, I frankly say that we who waited for admission have sometimes been concerned lest our older and more powerful brethren are losing sight of the objectives which in founding this organization they sought to serve.
Similar words are spoken by another African Prime Minister, Sylvanus Olympio of Togo.
Certes, le Togo est un petit pays, mais ces considérations importent peu, car
To be sure, Togo is a small country. But these considerations are of little moment, because a small nation may have sufficient wisdom to be able to contribute very effectively to international peace and harmony, and contribute out of proportion to its surface and population.
This attitude has already led to a concrete step towards adapting the composition of several key UN organs to the increased African membership. The newly independent states insisted on a reallocation of the seats on the Security Council and the Economic and Social Council. Nigeria's Jaja Wachuku, in particular, argued that the problem of equitable African representation in the making of United Nations decisions could not wait.
We can't afford to wait. There are matters to be solved, there are problems to be examined, there are researches to be done, and you cannot wait for all these things to be done. There are pressing problems to be faced now, and the need is now, not tomorrow.
When the time came to elect new members to the two councils, the delegates from Africa and Asia blocked Portugal as a candidate for a traditionally West European seat on the Security Council. Instead, that seat is now occupied by Liberia, the first African country south of the Sahara ever to serve on the main United Nations body for the maintenance of world peace and security. A recognition of the increasing importance of the new voices from Africa in international affairs in general and in the United Nations in particular. What these new voices have to say about the issue of colonialism will be the subject of our next program. It will recall a debate in the Assembly which resulted on December the 14th, 1960, in the adoption of an historic declaration.
You have been listening to The New Voices, the first in a series of programs for and about the recently independent African states in the United Nations. The New Voices was written and produced by the international staff of United Nations Radio in New York.